not critical of you or anything. Do you remember why you put C finally? No. Perplexity at Tiresias' slow response. Slow in what way?
He just kind of wasn't answering him. Like when they were going back and forth, he wouldn't give him a straight answer.
Okay. They don't know if you're stretching or you had. Okay. The key thing when you get these kind of questions, make sure you're taking a look specifically at the point that they want you to. So this is the line here, 293s, or line 293 is going to be right down here. Tiresias, seer of mysteries, of all that's taught and all that no man tells the secrets of the earth. Blind though you are, you know the city lies sick with plague, and from this plague, my Lord, we find that you alone can guard and save us. Possibly you did not hear the messengers. Apollo, when we sent to him, sent us back word about great pestilence and all this kind of stuff. How well known is it that Thebes is having problems? Very well known. Everyone is certainly aware of it. After this conversation takes place, what does Oedipus accuse Tiresias of? If not at least killing him and Creon being in cahoots with it, where they are responsible for the death. And I think that's where the loyalty issue would come from, or the one that Tommy was mentioning about Tiresias did not want to come. Because we know later on there ends up being some disagreement between the two, we expect that that might be the reason why he would be saying this. But at this point, we don't know all about that. Thebes is under this big plague, this big pestilence. You're the prophet. You're the one who generally would be able to know about this stuff. The main reason that he's kind of saying this, possibly you did not hear the messengers, that would maybe be the only excuse as to why he is so slow in his response. But I think the fact that we know as to what happens afterwards would make a lot of people take a look at C and D. But when you have a question like this, you really have to kind of focus on what's happening at that time, not so much what happens after. So it's an honest mistake. It's one that most folks were kind of going with. At the time that I was taking a look at it, we had, out of 16, when I was collecting some data, 13 of the 16 were going with C or D, but that would be the one that we would have going. Maybe Nate was that one?
Yeah, I don't think I picked it. I know that's right, though.
Can I see? I can. I don't remember who did. And so I wouldn't go, hey, everyone give Logan a standing ovation at this point.
I didn't get this one right either.
Yeah, well, and again, I'm taking the 4 that were most commonly missed. In his opening speech, it's apparent that Creon is distressed, and I think this is a tough question. I think this and the last one we're going to look at are probably 2 of the toughest. It is apparent that he is distressed by the accusations against him because of. If there were option E that said 1, 2, and 3, I think people would be picking all 3 of them. But this is forcing you to choose only 2. 3 of the 4 have 1 in it, Oedipus's position. So it boils down to a lot of people, is it 2 or is it 3? It certainly could be 2 only. Anyone want to throw out what they think they put?
I put 1 and 2.
1 and 2, Oedipus's position and certainty of his innocence.
I'm pretty sure I put
1 and 3, 1 and 2. Okay. Again, question. In his opening speech, it is apparent that Creon is distressed by the accusations. He's upset by the accusations against him because of, so trying to figure out which one of these would cause him to be upset. Men of Thebes, I'm told that heavy accusations have been brought against me by King Oedipus. I'm not the kind of man to bear this tamely or to take it calmly. If in these present difficulties being the plague, he holds me accountable for any harm to him through anything I have said or done, why then I do not value life in this dishonor. Basically, what is this saying? In these present difficulties, he holds me accountable for any harm to him through anything I have said or done, why then I do not value life in this dishonor. So I don't want to disrespect him. If I'm found guilty of this, then I acknowledge that something has to happen. Okay? It is not as though this rumor touched upon some private indiscretion. The matter is grave. The matter is serious. The fact is that I'm being called disloyal to the state and to my fellow citizens, to my friends. So we know that part of it's going to be position in Thebes. It kind of comes down to, is he worried about his own innocence or the seriousness of the crime, so to speak? The matter is grave. Now, is he certain of his innocence? Like in his deep down in his bones, in his soul, is he certain that he's innocent? Yes. But what is he willing to do? Or at least listen to what is the problem? I'm willing to go through with it. If you take someone like Oedipus on the flip side, if he was certain of his own innocence, he wouldn't even want to listen about what the whole argument would be against him. So it is the position in Thebes. It's also the seriousness that makes this so much significant for him, important for him. So we're taking a look at 1 and 3. He does think he is innocent, but he's willing to listen through it. So the seriousness is more of a concern to him than his actual innocence. He thinks he's going to be able to come through with it. 1 and 2, 10 of us were going, so like 63%. I think because we know he's innocent, that was kind of leading us towards it. I think this one was a simple mistake. Creon's response to Oedipus' statement, "That is why I call you a bad friend," Creon appeals primarily to.
I pick shared values.
Okay. Colin? Emotion. I don't know if this is the case, but I think the word that people might have missed is response. What does response imply in relation to "that is why I call you a bad friend"? If you are responding to it,
You reply to
it is the stuff that's going to be coming here afterwards. And then what is his explanation? Think of this first. Why would any sane man prefer power with all the king's anxieties? I can get power without having to worry about it. He's appealing to a sense of logic. But I think people would go or read, "Ooh, bad friend." There's an emotional appeal or a shared value. You know, I consider you a friend. You consider me a friend. That phrase itself was the one that was throwing people off a little bit. But if you take a look at the reasoning that he's giving, it ends up being a logical appeal. The problem with these questions that make it difficult is it's not a direct answer. Rarely is it a direct answer. And you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit and sometimes focus on a single word or two within the passage or within the question to give the answer. Last one we're going to take a look at here. And we had, one coming with logic. Emotion and shared values were the popular ones that we were going with. I think this was the toughest question of all. The tone of the ode. Synonym for tone would kind of be like, talking about a tone. If we say like the tone of a book, we mean the mood, the attitude, the author's mood, the author's attitude. That follows scene 2 can best be described as a proud tone, obviously a sense of pride. If you revere something or reverent, you look at it as being, Nate, do you have a definition for it? Okay. If you revere something, it's extremely respectful, you recognize its importance, you're kind of in awe of it a little bit. Critical, obviously going to have some concerns with it, might be kind of looking down on it. And then cautionary, there would be a little bit of concern. What was your hand? Okay, so we got cautionary. What do you think the most common answer was? A wasn't the most common one. A lot of folks, I think, went with reverent because let me be reverent, where right away you see this. When you read through the ode, it makes reference to we don't want pride to become too powerful. We don't want to focus too much on certain beliefs. The tone of it actually does become cautionary in that we're looking at some concerns. But critical had more. I thought reverent did. Critical and reverent, the negative tone of it was what I think people were focusing on. But overall, it's trying to keep people from making the same mistakes. Of the 16, I think that one was probably the most difficult one that you had to deal with. But I just wanted to go over a few of them, the 4 of them, just to kind of give you an idea as to some of the issues, some of the problems that could be coming up. But again, I think if you focus on some specific aspects, while we do more of these, we'll start to make a little bit more sense as to what we're doing. Essay is going to be starting next week. With your essay, and not the whole entire time, but with your essay, there are going to be times when you're going to be asked to write specifically a simple sentence, or a compound sentence, or a complex sentence. I know we've heard those things before. At the same time, pretty safe bet that we might still be a little bit shaky with some of those things. My seniors get shaky with it, or my juniors get shaky with it. Seniors tend to get a little confused sometimes with simple, compound, complex. So I want to go over those things to make sure we're pretty clear with how it's going to work overall. The notes that you have, this is going to match up with what's going on the Prezi. So you're not going to be stuck rewriting the whole entire thing, but it's going to be taking a look at filling in the blanks with some stuff. Next week, when we take a look at the essay, certainly you'll be expected to understand how these things are going to work. And throughout the year, we're going to be doing a couple assignments, some quizzes here and there, where we're going to be taking a look at simple, compound, complex. So I don't want it to be I'll know it for next week, and then it'll kind of go out of my mind. But this will be one of those things that we're going to be looking at for pretty much most of the year when it comes to any kind of writing assignment that we're doing. I'll zoom in as we need. Let me know if we need to get in closer for anything. But you take a look, first part that you have here for your piece on your notes. Common weakness in writing tends to be lack of varied sentences. If I said go ahead and start writing your essay, most people tend to go with simple sentences because there's less chance of making mistakes. For the writing to have some nice rhythm to it, to some flow to it, we want to have a varied sentence structure. So that means being aware of the 3 types that we have, being a simple sentence, being compound sentence, and being complex. If a person's listening to music or a person's playing the music, you don't want to listen to the same exact beat the whole entire time. You want there to be some sentence, some variety to it, variety of notes, variety with the beat, which creates the rhythm. Same thing's going to be happening with the writing. So it's having simple, it's having compound, it's having complex. The most effective writing is going to be using a variety of these sentence types. So we want you to kind of at least be familiar with how all 3 end up working. Jack has his own beat going on in his head right now. Any sentences going on in your head? Nope. All right, simple sentence. Simple sentence doesn't mean short sentence, but simple sentence has the most basic elements that make it a sentence. We have a subject, we have a verb, and we have a completed thought. So simple sentence, most basic elements that make it a sentence, a subject, a verb, completed thought. When you started learning how to read, a lot of times there were simple sentences that were taking place. Whole thing's under the question. C spot run, C jack chase spot, those would all be simple sentences. Again, it doesn't mean it has to be short sentence, and we'll get into some lengthier ones that would be there. But you got a subject, you got the person or the thing doing the action, you got the verb, which is going to be the action, and it's still a complete thought, so it makes sense. Logan is, I'm not filling in the blank. Logan would be the subject, is would be the verb, but I don't have a complete thought, so I would need something to finish it off. Logan is present. You're still here. All right, so some examples. I'll zoom in and then we'll kind of like slide down. They're starting pretty simple, then we'll get a little bit more complex. So the first one, oops, sorry about that. We'll do an eye test. That's why I'm going to say it to you verbally so you can listen. Joe waited for the train. Simple sentence.
He
You want us to use these for the?
I want you to literally write Joe waited for the train. Logan waited for the bus.
Most of your examples.
Because you sit right there.
You got it. You should use your phone.
I saw that.
Not thinking anymore. More of a,
You faded. Oh, it looks like fudge, like cherry fudge. I don't know what kind of cherry. Cherries. Oh no, it wasn't cherry, raspberry. Still. I still didn't read all of that.
the things that you say are completely random.
I know physically, but not mentally.
All right, so we got Joe waiting for the train. Second one. Train was late. Joe's waiting for the train. Train ends up being late. Number 3, little different, little more, I don't want to say complex to kind of confuse us, but a little bit different in the sense that Mary and Samantha took the bus. Up here we got like 4 words, simple sentence, but this one we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a little bit longer. The subject is a compound subject, Mary and Samantha. Just because you have multiple subjects doesn't mean all of a sudden it becomes a compound sentence or a complex sentence. It's still a simple sentence. You could have something after waiting, Mary and Samantha didn't take the bus. And that would still technically be a simple sentence. Number 4, I looked for Mary and Samantha at the bus station. Now we're definitely getting a lengthier sentence. Here, my subject has changed. It's I. It's no longer Mary and Samantha. My verb is now looked. What did I look for? I looked for Mary and Samantha at the bus station. So I can have other nouns. I can have other names. I can even have other actions going on. But this is still a simple sentence where I have a subject, I have a verb, and I have a completed thought going on. So again, a subject sentence doesn't mean you have to write 5 words or 6 words. It can be something that is going to be a little bit lengthy. And we'll get into the nuances and the differences between compound, complex, and simple and all that kind of stuff. Number 5, still a simple sentence. Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station early, but waited until noon for the bus. Mary and Samantha, compound subject. I have a compound verb because they did 2 things. They arrived and they waited. There is a word in that sentence that some of you would be going, wait a minute, you used that word and that word no longer makes it a simple sentence. And the one being but. Because, and we're going to get into those, fanboys. Any of your former middle school, elementary teachers mentioned fanboys? Fanboys, it's an acronym. We'll give it to you in a little bit. It stands for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So generally, if we see the word and, but, or so, people start going right away. That's a compound sentence. Compound sentence means you take 2 sentences and you put them together. If I were to go, Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station early, is that a complete sentence in its own? Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station early? Yes, that is a complete sentence. If I went with waited until noon for the bus, that is not a complete sentence. So just because the word but shows up, or just because the word and shows up, doesn't mean that it's becoming a compound or a complex sentence. You still got one subject, you have multiple verbs, but the same subject is doing both of those verbs, only stated once. It's going to still be a simple sentence. So if you take a look at them in whole, you could go from something very simple, Joe waited for the bus or the train was late, all the way down to number 5, it would still be simple. If I were to do a change to number 5, how could I make number 5 now be to oops, sorry. How can I make number 5 have 2 simple sentences joined with the word but? Like, what would be a simple addition that I could make?
Just add the subject.
So, Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station early, but I could say Mary and Samantha waited until noon. I bet a lot of people would use a pronoun they, and now you would have 2 subjects and 2 verbs going on. But in this whole case, I just have that one subject, Mary and Samantha. It's still going to be a simple sentence. So, the use of compound subjects, compound verbs, prepositional phrases, such as at the bus station, and other elements help lengthen simple sentences, but they do tend to be short. If you have too many simple sentences, it starts to become kind of choppy, and it doesn't read very well. It sounds like, no offense, a 5th grader. And I know what 5th grade writing sounds like because I have to read it every minute. And then I yell at her, my daughter, older daughter. 2nd grade sentences are worse. Yes, you are short. She's just taller. Well, I mean, you are taller than me. You know Mrs. Burns? Mrs. Burns is 11th grade English teacher. You could have her next year. She's down the hall. She's like 6'8".
I think this game talks about your daughter's boyfriend.
She is 6'2". 6'2". So what we're going to try to do, listen up. So what we're trying to do is vary up the sentence structure so that we don't end up having a lot of choppy sentences back and forth, back and forth. Now, we're down at the bottom of that first page. So at the bottom of the first page, a simple sentence can also be referred to, and this is the part that you would be filling in, an independent clause. It's referred to as independent because while it might be part of a compound or a complex sentence, it can stand by itself as a complete sentence. So sometimes we'll refer to something as being a simple sentence. We might also refer to something as being an independent clause. So if you have a compound sentence, technically you have 2 independent clauses that are joined together. So if you say it's independent, that means it could stand on its own. That means it would be a complete sentence if it was by itself. If we're going to have an independent clause, you also know there's going to be a thing called a dependent clause, which would not be able to stand or survive on its own. If you find yourself that you're using too many simple sentences, you probably can do some simple revisions that'll turn them into compound or complex sentences, which we're going to get into here a little bit later. So this would be the top of the 2nd page on your note packet. You're at the very top of your 2nd page. If you use many simple sentences or too many simple sentences, you would consider revising some into compound or complex sentences, which we're going to get into those definitions here in a moment. Raise this up so we can see it a little bit better. So in your essay, for example, there'll be some times where I go, I want you to here write a simple sentence, then I want you to write a compound sentence, then I want you to write a complex sentence. It's not going to be that pattern throughout the whole entire essay, but there are times where I want you to get practice so that when Jack knows he needs a complex sentence, he can put one together. When Dylan knows he needs a compound sentence, he's able to put one together, and he can distinguish between what those 2 things would be, let alone a simple sentence as well. All right, so compound sentence we're going to take a look at. Compound sentence refers to a sentence where you're made up of 2 independent clauses, or what would be complete sentences, but they're connected to one another with what is referred to as a coordinating conjunction. And the coordinating conjunctions are easy to remember if you think of the acronym, the word fanboys. So compound sentence, you're taking 2 sentences, you're putting them together with a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunction, we think of fanboys so that we can remember the 7 of them. When you link them together with the coordinating conjunction, you also need one piece of punctuation to go along with it, and that would be a comma. if you think of fanboys, each letter in the phrase or in the two words would be the first letter of a coordinating conjunction, which you can see are kind of down here. I'm going to zoom on those in a little bit. So that would be like your little cheat sheet. So let's say, hey, on Monday I give you a surprise quiz. List all coordinating conjunctions. You would write fanboys on your piece of paper, and then you would be able to fill in the blanks. Oh, that's a Mr. Woffington term. So those fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Now, again, that doesn't mean that every time those words show up that there's going to be a comma next to it. That doesn't mean every time those words show up you're combining two sentences. If we were to go, Logan and Justice sat in class, it's not a compound sentence. I just put and to combine the two of you into a compound sentence. Mr. Kane and Mrs. Kane both teach at North Hills. It's still one simple sentence. Just use the word and, compound sentence. Maddie and Nathan suffer in both Mr. and Mrs. Kane's classes is still a simple sentence, even though I use the word and. But Tyler will tell you that you can survive Mrs. Kane's class by the end of the year. Now I got a compound sentence. Assuming he survived. He's still. Nate survived. I mean, if Nate can do it, anybody. So, examples. We're going back to good old Joe in the train. Of course, it's... I hope not. First sentence. It's not showing up for you. I'll fix it here in a second. First sentence. Joe waited for the train. The train was late. Is before or after? Before the word but. Common mistake, people put it after. So, Joe waited for the train, but the train was late. Joe waited for the train, independent clause. The train was late, independent clause. The word but puts them together. Technically, I could put Joe waited for the train and the train was late, and that would still be correct, assuming I have my comma. What the word but does, though, is it shows a little bit of a relationship, kind of like a cause and effect. This happened, but this ended up happening, afterwards. I think sometimes we rely on the word and a little too often, so I want you to think about the fanboys so you can think of some of the other ones. Again, same sentence we had from before with our simple one. I looked for Mary and Samantha at the bus station, comma, but they arrived at the station before noon and left on the bus before I arrived. This is still considered a compound sentence. Just because I have the word and here between noon and left isn't making this a problem, because left on the bus before I arrived would be an incomplete thought. So they arrived at the station before noon, and I left on the bus before I arrived. Independent clause. I looked for Mary and Samantha at the bus station. Independent clause joined with the word but and comma. You could be sneaky and not use the word but, and it could still be a compound sentence, and not use for and nor or yet so. You're not very sneaky. You wouldn't use a comma, and you wouldn't use an exclamation point, but you would use, anyone know? You can combine two sentences. You use a semicolon. Semicolon's that colon, but it's a little comma down at the bottom. So I could do, I looked for Mary and Samantha at the bus station, semicolon, they arrived at the station before noon and left on the bus before I arrived. Doesn't matter. Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon, and they left on the bus before I arrived. Mary and Samantha left on the bus before I arrived, so I did not see them at the bus station. Again, just different ways that you can use the words and, so, stuff like that. of those fanboys, the one that you're probably least likely to use to combine two sentences, I'm guessing is probably 4. Yet doesn't happen often either. I think 4 is probably the least likely. I'll show you how you can use it later on. Yet's a good one to use when you're also kind of looking at relationships between two things. I did not study for my celebration of learning. Yet, I still did pretty well on it. There's a relationship. Even though this one thing did not happen, it still ended up working out okay. Have you had like a formal ball yet?
Yes.
No. Midterm, I think, is formal ball. Or grand ball is like your final exam. Informal, I don't remember all. Surprise parties, pop quiz? Yeah.
I guess first is what I remember when Gavin was there.
They said something.
Oh, yeah, that's the only ones I remember never saying.
We good with number 4?
Yes.
So this is bottom of the second page. Coordinating conjunctions are useful for connecting sentences, but compound sentences do tend to get overused. So there's times when they work, but there's also times where they can be a little problematic. Coordinating conjunctions can indicate some type of relationship between the two, but they sometimes don't indicate as much of a relationship as you would want. Sentences that do a better job of that are going to be the complex ones, which we're going to be taking a look at here in a little bit. If you're at the top of the third page, and this is kind of giving a follow-up with that relationship. The word and, for example, only adds one independent clause to another without indicating how those two parts are logically related. I think and is the one that does get used too often, and it can kind of weaken the writing. Not because and is a bad word, but if you are reading the same type of sentence over and over and over again, it can end up being a little problematic. Clear and more specific relationships help establish better ideas for the use of complex sentences. You're going to be writing about Oedipus Rex. You're going to be writing about how one scene can lead into another scene, and that there's a relationship between those scenes. That's when complex sentences might end up being most useful for you. And that's what we're going to start with tomorrow. So if you are finishing that up, you're going to be okay. The one thing about tomorrow, your homework assignment, not a surprise party or anything like that. You know that I'm collecting from you your figurative language packet. If you have questions about your figurative language packet, you are working on it, and you can't figure it out, then you want to come up and see me during homeroom. Check in with me, not because I'm going to give you the answers to something, but I'll certainly try to help you figure it out. So, what I'm looking for is explanation, trying to understand how that figurative language help making the point a little bit more clear. I'll be collecting that packet from you tomorrow. It's not going to be me walking around like the first time going good. So please, by all means, make sure you have that complete ready to go.
You give popcorn?
They happen, yeah. I already said Monday, so if you don't do Monday, then Tuesday.
Oh, what if you do that? I'm going to put in my 2 weeks.
And then you make it one of those true false tests where everything is true, and then this guy's flipping out because they can't all be true.
Now it's going to be Wednesday because it's going to be
Or, which is worse, true false tests, like say 10 of them where they're all true. Or do that where like they're all true except one. And then you're like, wait a minute, it can't just be one, it must be true.
Well, if the one that isn't true, it has to be like something outrageous. Yeah. It has to be like it's so much. Either it has to be something ridiculous, or something like. I stuck my foot in the lava and I'm still.